people? I'm Isaac Carlson, and on Following Dreams, I'm focused on exploring the stories of people who are following their passions and achieving their dreams. I want to help inspire you to pursue what you love by hearing how others have done it. But before we welcome our guest for today, be sure to take part in all of the magical places on the internet that I live. You can find all of my discussions on the wonderful world of Disney on my YouTube channel called Wotso Videos. Be sure to follow my adventures on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Wotso Videos. Consider supporting the show by joining my Discord and becoming a producer of the show over at patreon.com/WotsoVideos and getting the Following Dreams merchandise at WotsoStore.com. Feel free to send me a comment or question at followingdreamspodcast@gmail.com. And if you enjoy what this show is doing, be sure to rate us over on iTunes. Today we're speaking to one of the kings of exploring all of the kind of disturbing, grotesque, and weird backstories behind classic stories and films on YouTube. With theories, messed up origins, and film analysis all on his channel, he has been able to amass over 700,000 people who love their childhoods finally being explained. To check out all of the content our guest has made, you can find links to his YouTube channel and social medias down below. Welcome, Jon Solo.
What is up, man? And what is up, fun people? Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You are definitely one of those original theory guys that I remember watching before I was even making stuff. So it's an absolute pleasure. I can't wait to hear about all of the ways that you've been able to grow and understand your story and everything like that today.
Thanks, man.
So right away, I want to ask, what are you passionate about?
That is a good question. If I were to summarize it as concisely as possible, I kind of just want to get the most out of life that I can and get the most out of everything that I enjoy and do. So that's kind of where this YouTube thing has kind of stemmed from in terms of what I talk about. I love the things that I love, I get really obsessed with. And that has been, I think, kind of a byproduct of YouTube as well. You know, talking about Star Wars and Disney movies is where I gained my following right off the bat. And then I was looking into everything related to it for the sake of the channel, but then it kind of just became part of my personality. And now I do that on an even more grand scale where I'm doing serious deep dives into everything that I like. So even if it's not, a messed up origin story, it's a celebrity that I think is, doing great things out there, or a band that I just discovered that I can't believe I hadn't heard of before. So basically just living the life that I want and getting the most out of it that I can.
I completely understand that. It's especially once you've tasted it, the idea that you're able to have control over the things that you want to explore and do. I can completely understand that. That's a very similar thought process I've had when building my channel and doing everything online.
Dude, exactly. As soon as I graduated college and kind of around that time, my channel wasn't doing so hot. I was getting a little burnt out on the conspiracy theories, and nothing was really getting that much traction, I think, because maybe my lack of passion was bleeding through into my work. I started looking around for jobs and going to job interviews, and I was like, man, this is going to blow if I actually have to put the channel on hold right now. I'm going to have to sit in a cubicle and talk about things that have really no interest to me, and I'm going to have to do it on somebody else's schedule and this, that, and the other. And it was it made YouTube that much more appealing.
Yeah, that once you get into it, you don't want it to go away. And that,
right.
And that definitely comes through with how people adjust to it, whether they try to make more content, which is kind of my thought process going into 2020, or if it's like you, where you spent time diving into subjects in longer form content.
Right. Yeah, dude, I really wish that it seems like every time I want to make a video that's a little bit shorter, it ends up being way longer than I initially planned for that reason. I don't know, I get into a subject and I want to figure out everything about it that I can. So no matter how short the video I expected or no matter how short I expected the video to be, rather, I still want to cover all of my bases, you know, and I know that you kind of do that as well, being that you're consuming Disney content around the clock. So it's just kind of part of your life all the time.
Yeah, and that's something that I try to keep in mind too, is that everyone isn't at the same level of understanding of a topic.
100%.
So I want to make sure that people are fully covered before I even get to the parts that I'm really excited about discussing.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, one thing that I bring up often when it comes to the messed up origins is this categorization system. How should I phrase this? The system of categorization used to organize folk tales and fables and stuff like that, called the Arne Thompson Uther Tale Type Index, and it basically will pick out certain archetypes and motifs from stories and use that to throw it into a category. And, you know, people who've been watching my videos for a while at this point are totally aware that that exists. But I also want these videos to exist as kind of the standalone, even if you don't watch my content, if you're interested in this subject, you can learn everything that you need to know about it. And because of that, there's so many bases to cover before I dive into the index. Like, I can't just say this is tale type 711 and have people and assume that everyone's going to know what that means, you know? So there's a lot of preface is what I'm trying to say.
For sure. That's how I feel when I cover like Tangled the series, because there's often revelations that occur that could be interesting to people that have only seen the movie, but I want them to understand where this type of revelation is coming from or what is happening in the show to make it relevant. So that makes absolute sense. So going back a little bit, what were you like growing up in your small town of Illinois? What was that like for you?
It was quite the experience, let me tell you. It was, so for those who don't know, I come from a really small farm town of about 1,500 people. My class size up until high school never got bigger than 30 kids. And when I graduated high school, we had the biggest class at that time, which was about 50, I want to say. And we combined with 2 other towns. So, you know, my town's small, the towns around us are small, and there wasn't very much opportunity. Or like if you weren't interested in one of the like 3 main things people did, which was like sports, farming, and maybe something else like country music, something along those lines. So it took me a little bit to find what I was interested in, I would say. Like growing up, I was definitely a pretty nerdy kid, really, really into Star Wars and Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. And that consumed a lot of my personality. Like, I recognized that those were, like, from a very young age, I recognized that those were some stereotypically nerdy traits, but I always thought it was really cool, and I liked explaining it in a way to people, like my interpretation of it, like why I specifically thought it was cool. And yeah, I mean, I was always just really into the stuff that I liked, and I always had big aspirations as well. Like, you know, I was into Star Wars and Harry Potter and all that stuff, but what really sparked this kind of career path that I'm on now is watching like the behind the scenes of those movies. I remember watching and listening to the commentaries for Lord of the Rings with like my mom and my dad, and thinking it was so cool how they constructed these massive cultural epics from the ground up. And I was like, man, I don't know how I can be a part of that, but I want to do something similar. And from there, it just kind of grew. Like I said, there wasn't that much opportunity, so there wasn't really a way for me to pursue that until I got a little bit older. But yeah.
I came from a very similar place, that I was watching bonus features and wanted to either be an Imagineer, an animator, or be a part of that in some way.
Yeah.
And it, like, I've also noticed that I've been very consistent in the things that I've enjoyed. And that sounds very similar to you, where I've been into Star Wars, Spider-Man, and Disney since a very young age. So yeah, it's that consistency and being able to finally tap it into something. So is that kind of what happened to you? Is that you eventually, did you decide to start your YouTube channel in hopes of being able to explore these things you liked? Or what was the thing that really got you started with creating a channel back in 2010?
Yeah. So I would say, so I initially had my interest sparked from those behind the scenes documentaries and stuff like that. And then throughout junior high, I was fortunate enough that I got to visit California a lot because I had an older sister who lived out there and she worked as a speech pathologist. And she worked with a woman, I don't know if you recognize the name, but she worked with Jenny McCarthy, whose son has autism. And that kind of became, not solely because of Jenny, but that was kind of the focus of her work as a speech pathologist, was working with kids who had autism. And then her and Jenny, while around this time, they went into business together to create these essentially educational DVDs for kids who have autism. So like very basic but instructional videos with like how to play and how to use adjectives, what do these verbs mean, what are these nouns, etc. And she recruited me to act in these DVDs, so that was a pretty cool opportunity. So I got to be around, a basically full-on movie production, not to the degree that I always liked, but I mean, I was a kid. I thought it was so cool being around these huge cameras and being in a studio with lights and putting on these lav mics and memorizing my lines and whatnot. And then, of course, seeing myself in the final product when the DVDs ended up being printed and sold. And I had so much fun with that I was like, so I had these two things floating in my head, which is like all of my interests and then film. And I was like, how can I combine these? And then I remember specifically, actually, on the day that I graduated 8th grade. Was it the day I graduated? Or was it like the day of my 8th grade graduation party? Doesn't really matter. But my friends and I were sitting around at the computer and we were watching YouTube videos. And at the time, I didn't realize that you could set up a channel of your own and record stuff for people to enjoy. I thought it was like a place where you watched clips of the Chappelle Show and things of that nature, just like stuff from TV and music videos. But my friend had showed me a couple of channels, Mitchell Davis, if you remember him, and a couple of other people. And I thought their videos were really funny. And I was like, oh my God, from what I can understand, these people are getting paid or making a living off of making these videos. And they've got thousands of people watching them. I think that sounds pretty cool. I want to do something like that. So I took all my graduation money, pooled it together with my savings, and I bought an Apple laptop. And then I just started recording like what I perceived to be funny videos talking to the camera on my webcam. And those were of a very different nature. I kind of just emulated a lot of the people that I was currently watching. Like my humor wasn't really evolved past like being random at that point because I was still a kid. So I was like, what's the most random string of phrases that I can put together? And maybe people will think that's funny. Like, where did that come from? But so I did that kind of off and on very casually throughout all of high school. And there were a few times, like there are a few videos that I made back then that I'm still think were pretty funny about topics like country music or being the third wheel when you're like, because I didn't have a girlfriend for the majority of my time back in the little small town, so I was always the third wheel with my friends and whatever. And so I always try to share my perspective on stuff like that. And those, I'd say at most, I actually, for the Tosh.0, I don't know if you've ever watched that, but, Daniel Tosh's show on Comedy Central, he did a I Hate video challenge where he had people make I Hate videos and he would include clips of them. And I made one, and I didn't get featured on the show because it was way too late. Like pretty much every video I make now, it's so behind what is actually trending. But it actually got like 20,000 views, and all my other videos were 500 to 1,000 views at that point. So I was like, this is amazing. There's potential here. And then a couple of years later, I was sitting with, you remember K-Mac, right? You've watched some of his videos?
Ooh, I don't know if I ever have.
Okay, he was another like Disney Star Wars theorist. He started around the same time as I did.
Oh, okay.
But we were sitting around at a friend's party, and we were just talking about our YouTube channels because we were both trying to garner a following. And the topic of cartoon conspiracy theories came up, and this was the Rugrats one, like the very first one that I think most people have heard, which was that they were all secretly dead and part of Angelica's imagination. And
sure.
As we were unpacking the theory, we were both like, this would be a really good subject to talk about. And so we just both tried it, and people just started following us from that. And things kind of evolved from there.
Yeah, so then it was the finally stumbling upon the topics that were resonating with people at the time.
Exactly.
So from that point on, did you start to really focus on the conspiracy theories and start focusing on the more movie focused content that you really got your start with?
Yeah. I still did it in an extremely lazy way because I was a freshman in college, and I just had basically no discipline. I mean, I didn't even look at like the syllabuses for my classes or anything like that. It was so casual, but I knew that if I was going to be making a video, that was what it was going to be about. And when I'd make the theories, I would still put effort into them, but just the quality of the production itself was pretty much exclusively trash. And then from freshman year to sophomore, I slowly started to get a little bit more consistent, and I went from talking about just like any conspiracy theory under the sun to specifically Star Wars and Disney when I realized that my videos that were blowing up were all connected to those.
That was the similar thing that I discovered as well. Is that I actually started with Star Wars content. That was the main thing I was discussing.
Okay.
Was going through explaining Star Wars. But it was the Disney content that really started to hit off, and I was like, well, that's the stuff that I also really love, so that's fine by me. And that was the thing that kept me going.
Were you doing like educational, like here's these aliens, or here's what this character did in Legends? Like, what kind of Star Wars content was it?
So, like, my first video was about Master Sifo-Dyas and who that was.
Oh, nice.
And that first video got 50,000 views by the time I started, like, wanting to post on a consistent basis. So I was like, wow, videos can actually do well over the long time.
Yeah.
Over a long period of time. And then other videos I did was talking about like Darth Maul's backstory, what I thought happened to Ahsoka Tano after the Clone Wars, things like that. And so that was what I initially started off doing. But then it was around the time of Zootopia coming out that was when I started to realize that the Disney content could be something that was interesting to people and that lots of people weren't talking about. And I think that was something that you kind of tapped into too, that there still really aren't a ton of YouTubers who talk about Disney movies specifically.
No,
and those types of stories. Yeah, which is so surprising to me.
Dude, me too. And I mean, honestly, if I were watching your content and I was like, even if I was a Disney fan who like kind of wanted to talk about Disney, I think I would be so intimidated after watching your stuff by your level of knowledge. I'd be like, no matter what I do, I'm not going to be able to compete with that guy. He lives and breathes this stuff clearly. And I think that maybe that's played a role with, some of the other creators like Super Carlin Brothers, Seamus. People pop up, but I feel like, honestly, us four, like around that time where Zootopia came out is when that Disney theories and Pixar theories kind of became a hotbed. Same with Star Wars. Like, people were consuming as much as they could. Like, the Pixar theory had just come out. Force Awakens had just come out.
Yeah, everyone wanted to know who Rey was and who Snoke was.
Yeah, yes. Dude, oh my God, I made so many. I think I actually maybe didn't make that many videos about it, but I started so many videos about it. And then I was like, somebody's already talked about this, or this theory is not holding up. As I get farther into it, I got to bail on this, yada, yada.
And I feel like around that time as well was when I at least became aware that Disney was a large company and that I was starting to get into all of the elements a lot more, and they were becoming a lot more mainstream. Like, I felt much more comfortable talking about Star Wars on a frequent basis than I ever had since like 5th grade, because it was suddenly the massive movie had finally come out again.
Yeah, I totally agree. And one other thing about it, like, not only was it just suddenly more relevant, but for me, it was like suddenly far less intimidating to discuss, because there wasn't this backlog of Legends information that you absolutely had to know. Like, if you wanted to make a theory, you would definitely look into some of the Legend stuff and be like, well, maybe Disney's going to use this because this was part of the story before, and a lot of fans really enjoyed that, whatever. But there was suddenly just this blank slate where it was just the movies, the Clone Wars show and movie, and then whatever comics and books were coming out from like 2015 or whatever onward. I can't remember the exact year. But yeah, it was just suddenly so much more accessible. And like you said, you know, there were some people doing it, but not enough where I felt like I couldn't compete.
And that was one of the most intimidating things about discussing like comics and Marvel and Star Wars, is that for the people that really know it, it often seems like they've been solely consuming that for many, many years.
100%, dude.
Yeah.
So true.
The people that make YouTube channels about a specific subject have been very focused on that subject. Like, it's not something that you fully grow out of, or something that you suddenly start caring about out of the blue. It often feels like they've got a long history with it.
Right, exactly. It's like it's something that's become like a foundational part of who they are, almost. You know, like, I kind of felt that way when Star Wars, you know, when I first started talking about it, because I was like, oh my God, I've loved this for so long. Like, I've always nerded out about this with my friends, but suddenly, like, I get to share my passion with all of these people. This is amazing. But now, you know, I still stay pretty on top of what is canon within the Star Wars universe. But like, I've had so many requests to discuss Marvel topics, and I really wanted to do some videos about Thanos and like a comparison, like a messed up origins of Thanos, where I compare his story in the movie from beginning to end to his story in the comics. But, you know, there's, just like there was initially in the Star Wars Legends, like, there's various different timelines, and there's a lot of information, and some of it contradicts each other and depends on who wrote which comic. Like, there's so much you got to know. And it's just like, if I'm going to venture into this subject, I think I need to be working with somebody who's a little more knowledgeable than I am.
Sure. Because even though the MCU feels like they take a lot of stories from like the Earth 616, which is like the canonical main universe of the Marvel comics, I mean, they pull stories from everything, so you never really know what they're gonna do.
No, never. It could be anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, maybe that's like, maybe it's a kind of a defeatist attitude, like, and maybe I'm being unnecessarily anxious about it. Like, I just enjoy talking about things that I really know. I've grown so accustomed to it that the thought of talking about Marvel and then suddenly having a bunch of people comment corrections for stuff that I didn't even realize existed, like, it's not super appealing to me anymore. But it might just be like a wall that I need to blast through at some point.
I feel like the massive universes are a double-edged sword, because it's kind of amazing how massive channels like Star Wars Theory and Star Wars Explained can exist and continue to make videos every single day. But at the same time, I do kind of enjoy the contained narratives that exist in the Disney canon. I like that, Like, for example, The Lion King has expanded quite a bit outside of it with novels and the Disney Junior show.
Okay.
But I think it's so in that way, I like being able to see that universe get expanded, but it's just never going to be as massive and
Right.
unable to be approachable. Well, it is approachable, but it's much more manageable to be approachable.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, totally. Is the Disney content that you're talking about right now, like I know the Rapunzel series is still going on. Is that Lion King series you talk about too, like a new thing?
that, I believe, just got to its conclusion. There was 3 seasons of it. And what really interested me and got me into the show was that they resurrected Scar, which was something that I was not expecting. So they were able to use like the magic of the world to create like a volcanic Scar out of the lava. And so that was like a really cool storyline that I got to like talk about and research about.
That's kind of an interesting like mirror of Mufasa being in the clouds, you know? Like a certain amount of spiritualism and magic went into that, and then we have like the darker version of it with Scar in the volcano. That's pretty cool.
And that was the thing that I really tried to do whenever I talked about the Lion Guard, was it was a show that was clearly aimed at appealing to children, but there were elements and story points that I thought would be interesting to the Lion Guard fans or the Lion King fans that were already adults, that there was parts of it that could still be interesting. And that's what I took the approach to.
Yeah, that's definitely a good idea, because like one thing that I had a really hard time with when it came to talking about Disney content initially was like, I couldn't do the, you know, Steve from Blue's Clues, like, hey everybody, like high energy, friendly, like, let's talk about this dream world of magic, blah, blah, blah. Like, I felt so, like, I knew that it was just playing a role for the sake of the video, but it felt so, like, for me personally, inauthentic. Like, I couldn't make myself do it. And also, I could only stand so much kids' content. Like, it just got so old to me. And that's why I'm glad that I took this turn that I did, where I get to talk about some of the more mature aspects of these classic stories, because I can still look at them through my nostalgia-tinted lenses, but and just enjoy them for what they are. But then I get this whole different backstory behind it that makes it, like you said, appealing to not just kids, but also adults, and may give them a reason to revisit it or check it out at some point.
And that's one of the things that I've really enjoyed about seeing your channel develop over time, is that it feels like as you've gotten older, your content has matured with you, and that it feels like you become a more like refined adult as the journey has progressed. Like,
well,
if you know what I mean with that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It seems like it's all coming together in the way that it's developed.
Yeah, I think part of that came from, like, you know, when I talked about Star Wars and Disney, I felt so inclined to just kind of love everything that I talked about. Like, I always felt like this pressure from nobody but myself. Like, at the time I felt like it was from the audience, but in hindsight it was all me. But I felt like I was obligated to love everything. And at a certain point, like, I realized, and this was kind of has to do with like I don't have like a huge following on social media even still. Like, I'm slowly working those numbers up, but I've been doing this YouTube thing for a long time. I've got over 700,000 subs and like 5,000 and some change Twitter followers, you know, and most people of channels of my size have way, way more than that. And part of that, and the reason I've started to gain more followers over time and maybe my content has changed, is because I realized, like, I need to incorporate more of myself into these videos. Like, I'm not making these, like, I'm making these for the fans, but like I want to have some sort of thing that they can attach themselves to outside of just the subject matter. Like, I want them to like the fact that it's me talking about it, and hopefully they can, you know, form some sort of bond with me, and we can start building a real community. And that's kind of been my focus. So now I've seen some emails recently, like and some comments who were like, I used to really enjoy your stuff, but you started to make some darker jokes and you have morbid humor and blah blah blah, and I just can't support it anymore. And I'm just like, hey, like that's totally fine. If it's not your thing, it's not your thing. But this is how this becomes sustainable, and because nobody is gonna keep watching if they think that I'm not, like, if they can just find another outlet for the information. You know what I mean? Like they need to want it to be presented by me for them to get, for both of us to get the most out of it. So yeah, I've just like incorporated more of my own personal humor into it, and it's kind of been a little more blunt about my opinions on certain things. Like I've talked about Alice in Wonderland in the past, and I definitely can appreciate that movie for sure and different aspects about it, but is it one of my favorite Disney movies? Absolutely not. Like not even in my top 20. Like, and I don't feel nervous to say that because I know I can phrase it in a way that people are like, okay, that's just not his thing,
Is that I also have like not a huge diverse social following, and I found it very difficult to see the value in putting myself in, that I feel like, well, the person clicked on this video to hear this topic, so it feels like if I go on a tangent about something about me, that won't result into longevity of the viewer watching, and trying to worry about all the analytics of it.
100%, bro.
Yeah.
Seriously. And yeah, like you don't want to go on any personal tangents, or even stray too far off topic, because like to a certain point, like both your videos and my videos have an educational value and they're meant to inform people. So you kind of just want to get to what people are looking for when they click on the video. Like they want to know the messed up origins of this story, then that's what I need to get to within a reasonable amount of time. Or if they want to know all of these Easter eggs and hidden connections in the Rapunzel series, like I'm sure you feel a bit obligated to not dawdle with your introduction and stray away from the subject. You kind of just feel like you have to get into it.
Yeah. And I want to... So the way that I try to handle it right now is that I've just been trying to take moments where I give my thoughts about what's going on. Like, this was a really cool moment. I was really excited for this. Like, just trying to insert those small moments where people can get a feel of the things that resonate with me, at least.
I think that's a great way to do it. Yeah, because you're revealing parts of your personality when you do that. And you're just adding another layer to not just yourself, but if you point out what you like about the show or something that you have appreciation for, then that might shed some new light on something that the person watching was previously unaware of, and then they appreciate it that much more. Like they appreciate your video because you've given them a new perspective, or like, I really liked what Isaac had to say about this scene, Yeah, I think that's a great way to do it. And I mean, it's like when I watch other YouTubers' content, like I consume YouTube around the clock. That's definitely like my primary source of media. And so when I'm consuming it that much, like I personally don't mind when a person will deviate from the topic for like a minute or two to go on their own little humorous rant or whatever they got to do. So I always try to consider that when I'm thinking of doing something like that. I'm like, well, if I saw Danny Gonzalez or if I saw Philip DeFranco go on, like just do a little sidebar and talk about something else, like I that wouldn't bother me. Like I'm here to not just consume the content, but also consume them in a non-cannibalistic sort of way. So, so yeah, I think that's something just to keep in mind, that, maybe we might be being a little too critical and keeping ourselves in too tight of a box.
I agree. And the negative opinion thing is something that I've also thought about. And I've been very hesitant to give negative opinions about Disney because I want it to be a more positive and optimistic and magical experience. And so I don't want to criticize what someone really cares about. But I
Absolutely.
also, want people to know what my own thoughts are about it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
It's
a
all about,
difficult road.
yeah, it's about walking that tightrope. And I think just, if you don't say something, then just saying it in a nice way and explaining your reasons why. Like, one thing in particular that like just comes to mind is when I do Q&As, a lot of questions that I get have to do with anime. I think a lot of people who consume YouTube content consume a lot of anime as well. And I get asked, like, what's your favorite anime? What do you think of Death Note? Or yada yada. And I remember just answering like, hey, like, I don't watch anime. I have nothing against it. It's just personally, like, the stories aren't very interesting to me and I don't like the art style. But if that's your thing, that's your thing. And then I get all these comments that are like, that's how you disagree with something. Like, now that's the way that you like express your opinion without being rude about it. And
Sure.
yeah, just walking that tightrope. Like, I think you can still foster that positive environment that you want while also being critical.
Absolutely. So going back into learning more about your story,
Yeah. Yeah, went on a tangent there.
which is absolutely fine. In the early stages of you growing, I saw in one of your Q&As that you mentioned that you joined the Channel Frederator Network, and I've also seen that you've continued to partner with the network Ritual. How did you make that decision to be a part of these networks and continue to work with them?
That is excellent research, my friend. I don't know where I even said that I joined Ritual. But
Your LinkedIn.
oh my God. Okay, there we go. That's so funny. So back then, when I first joined Frederator, I didn't really. I think part of it was honestly ignorance. Like, I just knew that a lot of YouTubers were joining networks, and that seemed to be the way to go about it. And when I was doing my cartoon conspiracy series, Frederator had also started their cartoon conspiracy series. And they were looking to gain a bit of a following. I remember, like, even when I had, like, 30,000 subs maybe, I was getting more views on my conspiracy theories than they were. So they had me and then my boy K-Mac work with them on a few videos. And I really just liked the people that I worked with there. Unfortunately, those people have moved on to other places. But everyone was really cool and really friendly. And they offered a lot of really good advice about kind of just best uploading practices, things that now in hindsight kind of seem obvious or when they're explained to you, but before you know that that's a thing, you don't even consider it. Stuff that's just like, tags, or here's the best way to phrase your title, or here's how long your descriptions should be on average. And they just seemed like a good source of information. And then also, as soon as I joined them, so I was skeptical for a little while. I wanted to explore my options. Also, when I was initially signing with them, I was going for, with all of these networks, you have to agree to a split of some sort with your revenue. So I was like, is a 70-30 split really, like, do I want to lose 30% of my cash every month for these people? So I kind of sat on that for a while. But eventually I was like, yeah, I think it's worth it. So I did, and then all of a sudden, all of my videos prior to that had been copyright striked were earning revenue again, and I suddenly felt like a sense of protection, like I felt a little more safe uploading the content that I was uploading. And then I also appreciated that I had a place to go to where I could ask questions. Like, I remember within the first year of me signing with them, it was shortly after my channel started blowing up for the first time. They offered to do a channel audit for me. So they're like, here's what's wrong with your tags, your titles, here's what's wrong with your thumbnails, etc. And by applying that information, my channel just continued to grow. And I was with them for, I don't even know how long, I think 3 or 4 years. And it just got to a point, without going into too much detail, where I felt like I was kind of on my own. They weren't really doing that much for me anymore besides protecting me from copyright, which is the main reason why I didn't want to leave. Like, you've seen my content, and your content's pretty similar, where like, I use so much footage and art in my videos that if I can't let somebody try to take advantage of that by flagging something that they don't own and screwing me out of money. Especially at this point where it's my full-time job and every cent matters. So I had been hit up by like several different networks, and I just saved all of those emails. And I reached out to a few that seemed to be the most promising to me. And these guys at Ritual, they seemed to be the most genuine, I would say. I didn't feel like I was talking to like a corporate suit who was just trying to tell me what I wanted to hear. It sounded like they actually had some plans and some opportunities they could offer me if I signed with them. They offered me a better split. I got rid of that 70-30 split pretty early on. But, you know, I've got the best split that I've ever had right now. And, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. Like, I mean, a lot of thought went into the decision, but in the end, it just felt like it just felt right. I know that's kind of vague and doesn't really help literally anybody, but yeah, I was just like, I know that I've grown beyond what Frederator can do for me, and these people seem to be the logical next step on this journey.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Are you signed with a network, out of curiosity? Not to interrupt.
I'm currently not signed with a network.
Okay. Are you like still doing all right in terms of your copyright strikes and stuff like that? Like, you haven't been falsely flagged or?
I've only been falsely flagged. Well, I mean, there was times where it was like clearly the actual copyright holder that was going after it. Currently, it's really been only by DreamWorks that's been doing that.
Okay. Interesting.
Recently, but there was a false claim that it was a false identity that had claimed a song that I was using in my most popular video. And so eventually I contacted the person that created the track, and they said that wasn't me. And I was like, oh my goodness. So then I finally was able to go against it, and they were eventually willing to relinquish the video.
Thank goodness.
So, but so long-winded answer to explain, I'm not currently signed with a network, but I think it would be interesting to eventually have some type of manager or person to help with sponsorships and handling more of that business worrying side.
Exactly. So I'm really glad that you said that, because that was honestly a huge portion of my reasoning. Was like, these guys felt like they could pick up some of the slack that I was leaving behind just because I didn't have time to do it. Like, you know, finding artists or finding or negotiating with sponsors or looking for opportunities outside of YouTube to do like voiceover work or writing work, something like that. And it's been super useful. I would say that, like, I would say you could find an actual manager who would do that and not have to require like being linked up to your YouTube channel for it. Like, they would just be willing to take 10% of your revenue off the top, and then just go out in the world and find all of these other opportunities for you. But like the network that I've signed with now, they work with a small selection of creators, and they have a specific sect of people to do exactly the things that we're talking about. So I felt like I could really rely on them for that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds incredible. That sounds really good. I'm very glad that you're in such a good position with it now.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear about in your Q&As and seeing in your videos that you're able to have consistent sponsorship deals and things like that. It shows that there's a bit more stability when you're making your content, which is always a happy thing to see.
Exactly, dude. Like, that's one thing that I always have in the back of my head, is like, from the dark times where my videos just weren't getting viewed and I just wasn't feeling the passion anymore. Like, I always think about that, and I'm like, you know, this could disappear at any minute, you know? Like, I don't think that my channel would be adversely affected by COPPA, but something like that, like gets introduced that is connected to me in some way, shape, or form, and I suddenly need to find a new revenue source. So those sponsorships are most necessary, which is unfortunate because, like, as of right now, I'm still making more money through my AdSense than I am for my sponsorships, but that's gonna change over time, of course.
Absolutely. That's the trend that has most often been seen, is that once you eventually get to a tipping point where AdSense isn't the main thing, but definitely for me right now, it's the thing that I have to rely on.
Mm-hmm.
So what was your mindset when you were working on YouTube in college and when you were majoring in communication studies? Were you going after that major in hopes of being able to springboard your YouTube channel farther forward than it already had been, or what were you doing at that time?
Actually not even in the slightest. So when I first got to college, I was exercise science major. I wanted to be a physical therapist. And then the year that I started college, they changed the requirements to be a PT, and so that you suddenly needed to have a doctorate instead of just a master's. And I was like, well, I'm not passionate enough about this to do another year and a half of studying for it. So I switched over to business administration, and then I took business classes up until senior year, actually. But my great folly with that was I took all of the normal business classes, like, like global marketing and I don't know, I can't even remember at this point, but I took all of those and I saved like accounting, business calculus, macroeconomics, all the math stuff for the end. And then I was stuck doing all of that. And I'm so not a math oriented guy. I know that you are, but I am absolutely terrible with math. Like, English and in reading is my thing. So I was still trying to do my YouTube. It was like right during the initial explosion. So it was like taking a lot of my focus, and I would be up. I was probably getting like 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night on average during like my whole junior year of college, because I would go to class. I would have to do homework, but then I would also need to put, at the time I was uploading like 1 to 2 videos a week, that's not super impressive by today's standards, but at the time, like, as somebody who was just getting into it, it was a lot of work. And I just realized, I was like, I either need to put YouTube on the side and focus solely on school, or because otherwise I'm never going to pass these math classes, or I can switch my major and I can have a little bit more time for YouTube. So at the time I was minoring in communications, and I knew that if I switched my major over to communications, then I would already have some of the groundwork laid, so I wouldn't have to take a victory lap and do a bunch of extra classes. I was really trying to graduate on time, and that was just pretty much my way of doing it. And I don't have any regrets. It definitely made the job search harder because I made my internship credit my YouTube channel. I was a communication studies major, so that's like the least impressive major you can pretty much have. And I just had no experience, so like during the job hunt, I was having no luck at all. Like, good luck explaining YouTube to anyone who's over like 35 years old if you're going to try to go into the business aspects of it. They're just, even if they understand it, they're not going to give you the credit that you deserve for running a full-fledged business throughout your college career. So, it was just kind of like a last resort thing for graduating on time.
Trying to navigate the college realm and picking a major especially when that was just like not the main thing you were hoping to be able to do after college.
Exactly.
It's a very weird scenario to be in.
It really is. You're like, am I going to put this thing that has enormous potential to the side, or am I going to, do something that maybe I don't enjoy as much, but is a little bit more stable? And like, what could that thing possibly be? Like, what's something that I can do as opposed, like, instead of this, that I'm not going to be sitting there thinking, what if only, you know?
Man, oh goodness, I had a thought.
Yeah.
Now I'm trying to think of it. Oh, back to the point about only making like 1 or 2 videos a week. That's exactly what I've been thinking as well. That seeing these YouTubers who have been like posting every single day on a consistent basis, I'm like, I was only able to do 2. Did I miss my huge opportunity? I'm like, no, that's silly. That's silly. But it was like, at the time that's you do the best that you can at the time in the situation that you're in.
Dude, exactly. And here's the thing. When I subscribe to a channel, like unless it's like Philip DeFranco or somebody like that, where it's like fresh and new every single day. Like if somebody uploads every single day, I don't want to watch that. Like, so that's kind of always been my mentality with it, is like more uploads is better, but there is such a thing as too many uploads too. And I would rather, like, maybe it's not super logical, but I would rather keep some ideas on the back burner and upload them at a later date when I've had some more time to explore them, instead of rushing in just so I can produce more content. You know, it's quality over quantity is the mental game right now.
Because eventually you get to the point where the only way that you could make that much is if the quality got decreased, and that's the main thing
Exactly.
that I've been trying to avoid with the thought of making more content.
Yeah, 100%. You don't want to sacrifice the integrity of your channel just so you can keep your stats up, you know, because those stats at first might look real pretty, like you never have to worry about those views dropping down, but at the same time it's just, I don't know, like it doesn't feel as good to me, at least.
Yeah, you want to be proud of your work. That has to be a part of it. So when you completed school, what was your plan of action moving forward with YouTube? Like, what were you the most excited to tackle? Because that was around when your channel started to go on the uptrend that it has been going to this day.
Yeah. So I graduated in May of 2017, and so around that time, it was around that time actually that my channel got hit with a glitch, the dreaded sub box glitch, where people weren't getting notified about my content. So at first my views like just plummeted, and I really wasn't sure what the reason for that was. So I didn't even have that many plans right out of the gate. It was more just like, how am I going to keep this thing that I'm currently doing afloat? It was like, what are the theories that I've got to find? What are what's trivia do I need to talk about? Because that was kind of about as deep as it got for me back then. And then I went to VidCon over that summer, and I went to like a lot of really interesting courses. And unfortunately, I didn't really meet anybody that was super like knowledgeable or well connected like I had planned on, but I went to a lot of the lectures, and even then, like, I didn't know, I still had it stuck in my head that all I'm going to be talking about is Disney and Star Wars. Maybe I can do some more like educational deep dives on like the lore of Star Wars, and maybe do some like stuff about like the production of Disney movies, and maybe even the history of the company. But it was all very these weren't deep ideas. They were just like, I was just kind of grasping at straws. And then it was around the time when I started going for job interviews that I started switching over to the Messed Up Origins content, because I can't remember what exactly sparked it, but I just remember like I had the idea years before I actually did it. And then I was like, you know what? It's about time that I finally try this. Like, what I'm currently doing right now is clearly not working. It's about time I try something new. So I did, and I made 3 videos. I did Cinderella, Snow White, and Little Mermaid, and they all petered out between like 10 and 20,000 views, which sadly at the time like it still wasn't good for me, but it was like better than my other content had been doing in the months prior. So I was like, maybe I'm onto something. And then I remember actually, over Thanksgiving break of that same year, I was still in the ditch, still trying to dig my way out of there. And I had kind of come to terms with the fact that like maybe I just wasn't going to do YouTube anymore. And I remember specifically having a conversation with somebody that I was catching up with after graduation, and they're like, "How's the channel going?" And I said, explained basically everything I just did to you. And I remember specifically saying, if YouTube is just something that I can look back on and just think it was a cool thing that I did at one point, I'm happy with that. That's fine. But little did I know that at that exact moment, my messed up origins of the Little Mermaid video was blowing up. And it was blowing up like even bigger than some videos that I have now that blow up. And then suddenly I was like, oh my God, people are interested in this. And then I was like, this is the opportunity that I absolutely have to seize. Like, going to these interviews sucks. Looking at all of these requirements for these jobs that I'm not interested in, that I'm apparently underqualified for, because despite being entry-level position, they all require 2 to 3 years of experience that I don't have. Like, I need to try to make this work. And then suddenly I was just extremely motivated. And I kind of got tunnel vision on the messed up origins aspect, where I was like, this is what people like. This is what I'm going to give them. And then my goal was just, initially it was going to be to try to do 2 messed up origins a week. But then I realized that I could do deeper dives than I was doing at the time. And also there's, even though I still, to this day, years later, have plenty of stories that I need to get to, I was like, I don't need to burn through all of this fuel right out of the gate. So it's just about getting disciplined and then also pacing myself with my work.
And that makes a lot of sense. Being able to find something that you could latch onto that was going to be able to get you out of that rut, which is, I think, is an important thing to continue to be able to try and explore. There's times where I've done that and it hasn't been able to work. My long form content doesn't typically do as well as the other videos I have, but sometimes when you hit those low points is when you can reflect on what you're doing and try to find the next thing that's going to get you really excited again.
100%. And, like, yeah, either that or you just take it as a sign, or like that maybe you need to switch something up. There's a lot to unpack there, but I think you're spot on. Like, sometimes that just happens, and then you need to kind of roll with the punches. That's a huge portion of this business.
So around that time when everything was starting to blow up, you got the opportunity from friends to move to Florida. Do you want to talk about what that experience was like and how your short-lived experience in Florida was?
Yeah, absolutely. So pretty much at this point, so when my channel started blowing up again, one thing that I had in mind is when I had the realization that what I have the opportunity to do for a living is incredible. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity that I was getting a second chance at. And if I mess it up now, it's only my fault. I only have myself to blame. So I started, when it came to my content, I started going into it with this attitude of just, how can this be better? Like, as I was writing the script out, thinking like, should I talk about this thing? Should I not talk about it? And then I would think, well, will this make the video at least 1% better? Like, if it will, then you should do it. And if you come to that, if you ask yourself that question, like 5 to 10 times while you're making the video, will it make it 1% better? Then in the end, your video is going to be 5 to 10% better. And that might generate 5 to 10% more views. So I just had this tunnel vision sort of, where I was like, I need to do everything that I can to make this work. I hated living in Illinois. I hated the weather. A dream of mine has always been to get out to California, because it's just gorgeous there and there's a lot of opportunity out there. But I knew I couldn't afford it at the time, and I was like, I need to take some time to just really focus on the channel and make this as sustainable as possible. So some friends hit me up I leapt at the opportunity. I was like, I can live in Florida. I can live where it's nice and sunny all the time and everybody's got a pool. I can do that. So I did. And while I was there, I will admit that I definitely didn't live the Florida life that I think most people would when they get down there. Part of it was because I was suffering from my back injury and I wasn't really feeling like going out and doing things. Like, I wasn't feeling particularly adventurous. I didn't want to hurt myself more, and I didn't want to be out anywhere that I like was where I'd find myself in a lot of pain and unable to get back home where I could just relax and treat myself. So most of my time down there was spent like sitting at my own personal pool at the apartment complex and sitting in my room working on content. And I just, that was pretty much all I did. I was definitely working, I mean, to this day still am, like 50 to 60 hours a week on just making sure that whatever I put out there was the best that I can. And really looking at every opportunity, not ignoring emails because for whatever trivial reason I decide, like, oh, that doesn't sound very on brand or whatever. Like, I need to at least explore all of the options that I can. And I mean, yeah, that was basically it. Just like I focused on setting up the business, and then I kind of got bored down there. I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't very social. So my only two friends were my two roommates. And by the end of the lease, we had all kind of decided that we wanted to venture out elsewhere. I had gotten a girlfriend while I was down there, and she lives in Illinois. So the long distance thing was pretty lame for the first several months of our relationship, and I was ready for that to end. So I moved back up here, and I've just kept the grind going.
So the next question I have for you is, what is your process when you get into the grind? What is your path to make a messed up origins video? Because I think it's interesting to hear about how YouTubers make their videos, because everyone's got a little bit different way of doing it.
Yeah, 100%. So basically, at this point, I've got a huge list of recommended topics from the comments and me just taking notes on basically every suggestion that I can. And then when I'll look at kind of what's going on the calendar, like this week, it's Lewis Carroll's birthday, or it was on Monday, the 27th. So I'm going to be talking about Alice in Wonderland this week because it's kind of on subject. So I'll do something like that, or I'll see what I'm getting the most comments for. If there's a lot of demand for something, then I'll start to consider that. And then honestly, when I start the research process, I'll start with either looking up the story or honestly going to Wikipedia and seeing what I can find on there. Like whether it's just like a little synopsis or I don't look at maybe all of the information in particular, but I'll see like that there's a lot of information available, like about the author or stories that are related to it. And I'm like, okay, it looks like there's something here. It looks like it's not just me going in, paraphrasing somebody else's story and making money off of it. It looks like that there's something there's some value here. And then I will find a place. I'll do some research to find the original version of the story, the earliest that I can. Unfortunately, there's a lot of websites that I link to in my sources section in my videos where other folklore experts have compiled all of the versions of a story that there are. That doesn't mean that there's still a lot of information to sift through and keep track of, but that's a good portion of it. And then, looking up some more information about the author themselves and kind of taking notes on the whole thing. So I'll do a summary of the story and then certain things that were interesting about the story, like say, what's a good example? So like for Alice in Wonderland in particular, like I was talking about the Mad Hatter this week. So I was looking up everything I could about the hatter profession and what the process for making hats was like, and in seeing like if any of that is applicable to the hatter himself and in what what his personality was in the story and his portrayal in the movie, etc. And I kind of just, in summary, I basically just go on like a huge research deep dive, and I take extremely organized notes. And then I've kind of got all of these categories of notes floating around in my head where I'm like, okay, so I know it's the basic structure of what I need to be talking about. I know that there's going to be an introduction where I do a brief overview. I know that I'm going to have to talk about the version right out of the gate that most of the people are familiar with. And then what are my other subjects that I'm going to be talking about? So I'll lay those out. I'll figure out how they're connected, like what's the best order to discuss them in. So if I end on a certain note while I'm discussing the story, if I end it by talking about a particular subject, then I'll try to make the transition easy so that subject is connected to whatever the next section of the video talks about. And from there, it's just, writing, reading it out loud, thinking that sounds terrible, rewriting it over and over and over again until the script is pretty much complete. If I get to a point where like I want to make a joke or I feel like there's a little more to unpack about a certain section, then I'll go do that. I'll go back into the research portion, whether it's my notes or just back online and find everything that I can. It's kind of my way of breaking it down sounds kind of messy, but it's basically just learn everything that I can about a topic and then figure out how to make all of the information interesting, and then figure out where I can insert jokes, what pictures and clips are needed for the process. Like, are there going to be certain clips or pictures that help articulate my point a little more than there would be if I didn't show this? And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it.
Your videos are extremely thorough, so it makes sense that there's a deep process to go through in being able to execute those long videos that you're able to produce. So it sounds like you're doing a very great job going into everything, all the little aspects.
Yeah, I try. And then, there's also stuff that you just kind of have to do, whether it's for a specific video or not. Like, I've read a couple of Disney books. Like, two of my favorites that I've read are the Disney version and Disney War. I don't know if you've heard of either of those.
Oh, yeah, I have.
But so like, if I can just, so a lot of it is about like exposing myself to new sources of information. So like when I was reading the Disney version, and it talks about Walt's journey from being on his parents' farm to being the man that he became, it would talk about like he started with shorts, and like here's a few, like it would list some examples of his shorts and like some trivia about that. And I remember like it talked about his Three Little Pigs short, and I was like, oh, like the Three Little Pigs, I didn't even know that was a Disney video actually, and I watched that all the time as a kid, and so maybe that would be a good subject to talk about. So then, sources of inspiration are kind of everywhere. But yeah, it's about consuming as much related media and content as I can.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That makes sense. So now that you've been able to have all of this success and you've been able to develop this really successful series, where do you see your journey going further into the future? What are you looking to make?
That is a really good question. Honestly, it's kind of hard to say. Like, on the one hand, I don't ever picture there being a time where I stop making YouTube videos, at least as long as the platform exists as it currently does. Like, I have always wanted to be a YouTuber, and I'm making it happen, and I don't want to lose that. But at the same time, there's a lot of YouTubers who have found success doing things that are completely off the platform. So I do want, like, there's certain things that like maybe go into the production process that I would kind of like to explore in a different avenue. Like simple things like just being the talent, doing more voiceover work, or potentially like, I don't think I could ever act, but I think that I could be the host of a show and that's kind of in a similar vein as what I do now, where I'm talking to a camera and presenting information of some sort. But when I look at people like Philip DeFranco, that gives me a lot of inspiration because he took something as simple as the news and he made it. He did this completely new thing with it, and then he made that his entire brand, where now it's a full-fledged business. He's got editors, he's got other people doing the news for him on different channels, stuff like that. And I think that would be a really cool angle to take this, where I've got a lot of potential series that I want to get into outside of Disney, fables, and mythology. I really want to get into history. I really want to do literature, like that's not just fairy tales and fables, but like really long books that maybe people don't necessarily want to read or don't, or physically can't read for whatever reason. It's just too intimidating of a venture, and I can provide like a way to make that a little bit more accessible than it was prior. But I want to turn it into a large scale educational channel where I can unpack various aspects of our culture, whether it's movies, shows, stories, etc., and kind of be the go-to source for a lot of this stuff. Because like there's definitely other mythology channels out there that do an excellent job presenting the information they've got, and maybe their videos are even a little more in depth than mine currently are. But I think that maybe their videos are kind of boring, or they're not like of the highest quality in terms of like the narrator isn't that great, or they're using low res images and stuff, and anything. When I started talking about mythology, I was like, okay, it can't just be me educating people on this one subject. It has to be me completely making it my own and presenting it in the same style that people enjoy all of these other stories being presented in. And I really think that there's something to that, where people want to be educated, but they want to be entertained at the same time. And I think that I could really make that my entire brand, if that makes sense.
Yeah, make content that's approachable education,
right,
that is integrated with your style and personality in a way that can reach different types of people.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And like one thing that's great about these stories is that even though a lot of people aren't going to just be looking them up out of nowhere, I mean, like I probably wouldn't either, if I wasn't doing something that was so connected to it. Mm-hmm. But if you stumble on it, like every person, whether they like Disney or not, probably has some sort of connection with a Disney movie from their childhood. And the same can be said for, the fairy tales and fables or the Greek gods, where maybe they're not super into mythology, but they've always thought that this particular god was kind of cool, or they thought this event was kind of interesting. And then I could present it in a way that's, again, approachable and casual, but still totally informative and also accurate. So they're not just sitting there being lectured to, but also feel like they're being entertained.
That's a really interesting and intriguing goal. That was not necessarily where I was seeing, like, it's always interesting to see where people are taking themselves and picturing or looking back at how they're doing things based on the progression that you've been going on. What you've been saying makes a lot of sense now that you've said it. And I think you've got a definite opportunity to go after that and be a huge leader in that space. Because I feel like doing that would be a very cool, more mainstream way of doing topics like that. That sounds really similar to like Wisecrack's Thug Notes. That's what it is.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. Honestly, I think about that every once in a while too, because it is kind of like a similar thing. Definitely, I'm nowhere near as thug as them, but it is. It's a similar concept, and that's what I mean when I say taking on people who, like we were talking about earlier. Like I am not as knowledgeable about Marvel as a lot of other people, but it would be really cool to hire somebody who is just as passionate about Marvel as I am about everything I discuss. And maybe they're looking for an opportunity to talk about it with people, and then they can be a new face on the channel. And then not only are you being educated and entertained, but you're also getting reliable information from somebody who is passionate and as informed about it as possible.
Absolutely. And I wish you all the best of luck moving forward with that.
Thanks, lad.
Yeah, absolutely. Finally, Jon, I want you to tell the listeners what you feel is the number one piece of advice that would help them follow their dreams.
I would say, great question. I would say the two keys to the success that I've had so far have been absolute honesty and putting in the extra 1%. So it's not like it's like when you're making a video, you definitely want it to be as great as possible. But sometimes you let yourself get away with doing something maybe a little lazier than you should. So, when it came time for me to ask myself, like, could this video be better? If I included this information, would it be at least 1% better? Then I needed to answer myself honestly and say, yes, it could. Not give myself the answer that I want. And that same thing applied to my work ethic. Like a lot of people that are in our shoes and are kind of trying to be entrepreneurs, they tweet and they post on social media about how they're hustling 50 to 60 hours a week, when in reality, they're hustling 20 to 30 and they're on their phone for the other 20 or 30 watching Gary Vee videos and stuff from Tim Ferriss, And it's like, you can't let yourself do that. You have to be honest with yourself about how you're spending your time, the amount of effort that you're putting in, and how much you actually care about the stuff that you're talking about. And that's kind of like, it's partly why I strayed away from Star Wars, because even though I'm a huge Star Wars fan to this day, and I'm like reading one of the new books as we speak, and I just finished Rebels, like I got to a point where I had to ask myself, like, am I talking about this because I'm enjoying it, or am I talking about it because I feel obligated to, because it's something that I've always done and now it's just something that I'm a little too afraid to let go of? And the answer was the latter. Like, I can still enjoy Star Wars on a personal note. I've got plenty of friends that I can discuss it with, and I've got enough of a fan base where I can tweet out random thoughts about the stuff and maybe, have conversations with people about it. But that was a necessary piece of dead wood that I had to burn away so I could evolve into into what I have become. So that was kind of a roundabout way of saying it, but just being honest and giving the extra 1%. That would be my advice.
I think those are great points to bring up. Those are great points of action that people can take to go towards the things that they really care about. Jon, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to be able to talk to you today.
Of course, man. Thank you so much for having me. I was really excited for this. I've been listening to, pretty much all of them. I've just been going down the list, and I think this podcast is really cool, man. So it was really exciting to get to be on it.
Thank you. I've noticed more and more recently that there's a lot of Disney interview podcasts, and it's kind of been an intimidating thing to get into, but it's been a lot of fun to be able to have these conversations. And so I've been enjoying the process of making them. Yeah.
Well, you're doing your own thing with it too, which is what I really like. Like, you're going at it through the lens of following your dreams, and because that's something that you're doing right now. And you're not just sitting here talking about, it's part of the conversation, talking about Disney movies, etc. But you're doing something a little more that I think people can really get something out of that maybe some of the other Disney podcasts aren't. So it's really great.
I look at it as if I think of it as, are there young adults that want to do these things, but are too intimidated to watch things like Gary Vee and Tim Ferriss.
Right.
And I want people to realize that it's not just about being a CEO or being a billionaire, but it's like you can be an artist or talk about the thing that you really love and have that be your dream. And I think by watching other people succeed, people can aspire to something or get pieces of knowledge and understand that people went through their own journeys to get there, and that we didn't just suddenly have half a million subscribers.
I completely agree. That's one thing that, like, as the channel has grown, has become such a eye-opening thing. Like going through that tumultuous period where it looked like I could lose everything that I had worked at for the past couple of years, and then rising from the ashes, and then not just that, but like getting to that 500,000 subscriber mark and all of the effort that took. And, when I looked at people with 500,000 subscribers, when I had 100,000, I thought those were like the biggest people. I had so much respect for them. I thought that they were just like on a completely different level. And then here I am, and it just turns out like, no, they hustled, they were passionate about what they were doing, and they figured out what they were good at. And not to go too far back, but when it comes to that honesty thing that I was talking about, I think that that's part of it, where you also have to be honest about your skills and your interests. And, it wasn't just that I kind of lost interest in talking about Star Wars on this massive scale. But it was that I had to ask myself, like, can I bring anything unique or different to the table? Like, is there going to be a reason to watch me over any of the 3 or 4 other guys that are doing this and doing a really great job? Like, Star Wars Explained does an amazing job with his, education, of educating people about the lore. And as much as I love the Star Wars lore and as much as I love educating people, he's definitely better at that than I would be. So, it's about, you got to really pick the right avenue to put all of your effort into.
Yep. It's choosing that natural inclination for the thing that you would want to go down, because I couldn't be a daily Disney vlogger and going to the parks every day.
No.
Like, that's just not my personality. But there's people that do such a great job of doing that and have curated a community around that. And that's awesome.
Right. Yeah. And that was, kind of it when as I strayed into the messed up origins aspect of Disney was, when I watched your videos and I saw how great of a job you did talking about all of the, not just the movies, but I mean, dude, you watch all of the shows, like all of them. Like, I knew that no matter how much I talked about it, I wasn't going to be able to do that. And I definitely wasn't going to be able to be as genuinely interested and excited about it as you were. So, like, I just knew that wasn't the realm for me. And just, I'm parroting your point, but you're just totally right.
Yeah. And one other thing that I want to throw out there for people that are still listening at this point is that I watched a video recently about how many videos it takes on average to get to certain milestones on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And most people that have over 1 million subscribers have over 1,300 videos.
Oh my God.
Yeah. That to get to those huge milestones, on average, it literally takes thousands of tries.
I need to see really quick how many videos I currently have, because it's definitely not that many.
No. I have over 400. I think I have 450, but I don't know for sure.
Okay. Yeah. I think, does Social Blade list it off?
Yeah.
Sure Social Blade does.
Oh, I have 415 uploads.
Okay. Yeah. I've got 457. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that actually, I'm glad that you said that, because I feel a little bit better. Because like sometimes I feel like, even despite all of this growth that I've been experiencing lately, I look at other creators and I'm like, a year ago they had 700,000 subs, and a year later they've got 2.5 mil. Like, how is that possible? And mm-hmm. I don't do enough due diligence and see how many uploads they had to get to that 700 mark and how many uploads they had in between, So, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really interesting point.
And I'm reaching a point right now where I'm hitting the the bottom of a wave. So it's definitely keeping things in perspective after all of that COPPA worrying and being able to move forward that into 2020. I feel so much better than I did in the last few months of 2019.
I'm sure, dude. I could see on social media that you were stressing about COPPA, and I mean, you had every right to. When I thought about COPPA itself, I was frustrated on your behalf because you are like a truly authentic, genuine creator who is doing his best to educate and entertain kids and build a passion for video creation and for Disney. And you were potentially going to suffer the brunt of people who make like completely low effort videos for kids that are just there for the sole sake of plugging merch and getting them to watch another video and then getting them to watch another video. And those are the people, like the bottom feeders, were going to figure out a way for this to not impact them. And I was really feeling for you because that's just so not what you deserve.
Well, especially since in my mind, I don't make content for kids at all. That this is for other like millennial or Gen Z who enjoyed growing up with this and are now interested in knowing the full stories of these characters or events, and that might be interesting for some kids, especially when it's based on the shows that they're probably watching.
Right.
But it's designed with language that's for adults to be able to enjoy it.
100%.
So that was a big worry going into the end of 2019, but I'm feeling so much better after being able to really get back into focusing on what got me excited about making videos.
I'm really glad.
Is one of the main things was trying to diversify at a rapid pace, trying to figure out any way that I could monetize everything, and then I couldn't focus on the videos very much. And now I'm trying to focus on making the videos great again. So the 1% better every day is something that's been resonating with me right now.
Great. I'm really glad.
Yeah, for sure. And with that, I think it's a great time to wrap up. It's been a pleasure. To all of you who are listening, if you haven't seen Jon's work before, you can find links to everywhere he is on the internet in the description. And if you enjoyed this discussion, let me know by rating the podcast and subscribing. Also, it'd mean a lot if you followed me over on Instagram at wotso videos and considered supporting the show by supporting me over on Patreon, which will also be linked below. Following Dreams is a proud member of the podcasting network WBNE, which is a family-friendly group of podcasts who work together to grow as one. With fantastic shows like Sincerely Us, Bagels, and Bacon and Eggs, you're sure to find a show to listen to that will continue to brighten your week after following Dreams.
That's What I'm Talking About follows me, Mary Clay Watt, on my journey through Lord of the Rings for the very first time. Join me each week as I have fans on as guests so we can discuss the books one chapter at a time. From WB&E, That's What I'm Talking About. New episodes every Tuesday wherever you get podcasts.
To all of the fun people who are out in the world, thanks for listening and have a magical day.